All right, I'm going to start by telling you a fable. I don't think this really happened. Maybe it did, but I don't know. So this is a philosophical fable. And the way the fable goes is like this. There's a farmer. He's worked hard his whole life on this piece of ground. He's trying to turn the ground into a piece of land that will produce some fruit and some crops. He doesn't have a family. He's not married, doesn't have children. He's getting older, and he can't keep working the farm. So he decides he's going to give his farm away, and he's going to give his farm away to people in town. And here's what the farmer decides. He places a sign in the front yard of his house to everybody in town, "I will give you my farm for free." The sign basically says this land is free to anyone who can prove to me that they're totally satisfied. So, of course, this sign becomes the talk of town. And everybody's talking about that piece of land. All of the farmers that live next to him would love to have his land and add it to their farm. All of the people that are in town are talking about this free piece of land that this farmer has worked hard his whole life to cultivate. He's about to give it away. And of course, people start knocking on his door and explaining to him why he should give the farm to them. Eventually, they keep getting turned down. And so a banker in town, probably the wealthiest man in town, decides, "I'm going to give it a shot." He goes to the farmer's house and he knocks on the farmer's door and he says, "Listen, I've been successful my whole life. I've pretty much got everything that I need. I have enough money to pay for all of my bills and I don't have to really worry about anything. I'm the guy that you should give the farm to." The farmer looks at this banker and he says, "If you really are that successful, if you really do have that much going for you, why do you want my land?" And you see, this is the philosophical conundrum that nobody in town can answer. This is what the farmer was trying to demonstrate to the entire city. If you really are satisfied, why do you want my land? And if you want my land, are you really satisfied? The fable ends like this. Nobody gets the land, the farmer dies, and the house goes vacant because there really is no way to prove to somebody that you're totally satisfied by asking for more. I'm starting this sermon with this parable, this fable, because it's supposed to describe something about my heart. And don't sit there on your couch and act like this isn't you too, because you have this in your heart also. All of us have this heart that sometimes wants more. It's something that's deep inside our DNA. And today what we're going to do from the book of Nehemiah is we're going to take a look at how you can get that disease, that virus that makes you continue to want more, not be satisfied with what you've got. How we can get that virus out of our heart. So if you're tuning in for the first time, we're Two Cities Church, a family of faith in the Chattahoochee Valley, both Columbus, Georgia, and Phoenix City, Alabama. And we're studying through the book of Nehemiah today. I'll tell you where I'm going with this sermon in one really short sentence, but be careful because this sentence is going to hurt a little bit. Here's what I want you to hear from Nehemiah chapter 5 today as we look at this guy who lived in the Old Testament. Giving is the cure for the can't get enough virus. See what I just did on the screens there? You know, the coronavirus. You see what I just, you guys get it. Okay, so giving is really the solution to the desire for more, and even when you get more, it doesn't satisfy you. This philosophical conundrum that this farmer described. Now, I want you to just hold on for a second. Don't click off of the YouTube or the Facebook app, because I'll just put you at ease right now. I'm not going to ask you to give your money to this church today. And you're thinking, maybe I'll stick around and listen to what this guy has to say. No, what I want you to think about today is the condition of your heart. You see, Jesus is supremely concerned about what's going on in your heart. He's a lot more concerned about that than what's happening in your bank account. And so as Jesus' people, we're a lot more concerned about what's going on in your heart than in your bank account. And today is all about the heart. It's about this incessant desire for more. And I'll just give you a hint. Trace your family history back as far as you can go. I'll save you some money. You don't have to go to Ancestry.com. This started with our first parents back in the Garden of Eden. You see, God created a paradise for Adam and Eve, gave them everything that they could possibly want in that garden, and put one tree off limits. And Adam and Eve started to want that tree. Adam and Eve ultimately ate from that tree of forbidden fruit. And since Adam and Eve, every human being, this is worse than the coronavirus, because every human being that has ever walked on planet Earth, except for Jesus Christ himself, has been infected with this virus. Today, I'm just going to give you a couple of simple ways to push this greed, this desire for more out of your heart. And there is the answer to the problem. You have to replace the desire for more, the can't get enough virus, with something bigger and something better. So we're going to study through the book of Nehemiah. And I want you to hear the first step in pushing this desire for more out of your heart. And the first step, I'll tell it to you right up front, it's going to hurt a little bit. It's for you to give something away, to give something precious to you away, to give your treasure away. See, let me tell you about the guy Nehemiah before we dig into Nehemiah chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 14 in just a second. But I'm going to explain to you about the guy we're reading about. Because this guy who had spent his entire life in Persia, in the capital city, working for the king, the most powerful man on earth, this guy had it made. And this guy feels God tug on his heart and ask him to leave Persia and to go to Jerusalem and rebuild a broken city. He had the perfect life before he leaves Persia. And when he gets to Jerusalem, it is nothing but hard work and suffering and people who don't like you and will stop at nothing to prevent him from rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Let's hear how this guy handles his own personal desire for more. From Nehemiah chapter 5, we're going to start in verse 14, and here's what the Bible says for us today. It says, "Furthermore, from the day King Artaxerxes appointed me to be their ruler, or the governor in the land of Judah, from the 12th year until the 32nd year," and I'll just do the math for you, this is 12 years. For 12 years, I and my associates never ate from the food allotted to the governors. That's a big deal, and he's going to explain to you why. The governors who preceded me had heavily burdened the people, taking food and wine from them, as well as a pound of silver. Their subordinates also oppressed the people. I didn't do this because of the fear of God. Instead, I devoted myself to the construction of the wall. And all of my subordinates were gathered there for the work. Very important phrase. I'm going to leave this last sentence on the screen for just a second. We didn't buy any land. Nehemiah is a governor. And like in our day, you're a pretty big dude if you're a governor. Or if you wanted to do this, Anchorman style, you're a pretty big deal when you're a governor. Nehemiah is the kind of guy who is a leader and has pretty much all authority over the land of Israel at this point. Now, I hope you are already aware of this. There's basically two types of leaders in the world. There are those kind of leaders that are just trying to get the top seat, the big position, because they want the big fat paycheck in the corner office and their name on a parking spot. In other words, they're only in it for what they can get out of it. And then you have some leaders, very few, they're very rare, but you have a few leaders that keep pursuing the next position because they feel like they can do some good and the people around them, their lives will be better if they're leading. There's really only two types of leaders on the planet. Those that are in it for what they can get and those that are in it for what they can give to other people. And Nehemiah is showing us what kind of a leader he is today. 12 years of hard work. That's what Nehemiah is describing for us today. Do you ever wonder, hey, Nehemiah, why did you go to such lengths to tell us when you started as governor, how long you've been serving as governor, and then even do the math for us today? Why is 12 years such a big deal? Well, I think the answer to that is because Nehemiah is saying, y'all, I have been busting my tail in Jerusalem for 12 years, and I could have got rich off of this position, but I'm not. In fact, everybody else who was before me, they did get rich off of the position of governor, but I'm not getting rich off of it. And the reason why I'm not getting rich off of it is because Nehemiah really knows I am a governor who has been appointed by two kings. King Artaxerxes sent me over to Jerusalem to go rebuild the city, but ultimately I have been commissioned by King Jesus. And he is the reason why I'm in Jerusalem. He is the reason why I'm serving. I don't take from other people, though I could, because I'm here not just serving King Artaxerxes. I'm here serving King Jesus. And so I act differently. Nehemiah should have been able to buy some land. Now, you're probably thinking, what's the big deal? Well, for all of you flip-floppers out, I don't know all of the junk that they put on HGTV, but for all of you house flippers out there, I want you to do some math for just a second with this last sentence on the screen. Because here's what Nehemiah is saying. Hey, y'all, I could have rolled into Jerusalem while the walls were still down and the city was in rubble, and I could have bought a bunch of land. And then I could have got the people of Jerusalem rolling up their sleeves and working on the walls, which is what we've been doing. And because I own a ton of land, as the walls get rebuilt and as the city starts to get restored, everybody's property value goes up. Cha-ching! Nehemiah is saying, I could be a gajillionaire right now. I don't know how much money that is, but that's basically what he's saying. If I would have bought some land and invested early, by now that land would be worth tons of money. But I didn't do it, because I had a soft heart for the difficult, the hard times that my fellow countrymen in Jerusalem were going through. They're unemployed, and they're working their tail off, and they've got nothing to show for it. I want you to picture what Nehemiah is saying in chapter 5 for just a second like this. Right now, America is experiencing the highest unemployment on record. These numbers fluctuate, but somewhere more than 30 million Americans are unemployed. So imagine this. Imagine you're unemployed, and if that's you right now, I want you to know our hearts are heavy for you. We've been praying for you about finding a job, because right now you're stressed out about paying for your family's food, and that's a heavy load to carry. So imagine you hear that there's a job offer, and you go sit down with this employer, and they start to explain to you the work that they're going to ask you to do, and here's what the job offer sounds like to you. Tell me if you're going to take this job. They say, hey, here's the bottom line. We're a brand new company with a whole lot of work to do. We've got basically nothing but hard work in front of us. And I just need you to know, because we're a brand new company, we don't have a whole lot of assets. So we're going to give you a job. We're going to guarantee you a job for the next 12 years, and it's going to be back-breaking 50, 60, 70 hours a week of work. Oh, by the way, we're not going to be able to pay you for those first 12 years. Are you still going to take the job? Oh, by the way, it's not just 12 years. Oh, it's not just 50, 60, 70 hours a week's work. It's not just not going to be able to pay you for this job, but we also probably should tell you right now, our lawyers are making us say this right now, you might get killed. You very well possibly will get killed doing this job, and we can't pay you. Are you going to take that job? Because if you're like me, you say, hey, I think I heard Burger King is hiring. I'll just go to Burger King and work there before I take a job that might kill me for nothing but hard work for 12 years with no pay. That's the job that Nehemiah signed up for. And Nehemiah signed up for this because his heart was starting to become greedy. In fact, go back and listen to last week's sermon, and I'll describe for you from Nehemiah chapter 5 how he started to become greedy, and it started to impact his heart. And so Nehemiah decides, you know what? I have to give something away. I have to give something really precious to me, really treasured to me away, or else this greed is going to take over in my heart. I'm going to ask you to do something that's going to hurt a little bit. I don't know if you're wrestling with greed. I don't know if you have this can't get enough virus inside of you and this incessant desire for more. But if you do, I want you to go through your house this week. I want you to think about some of your most treasured possessions this week. And then I want to ask you to take one of your most treasured possessions and give it away to somebody else totally free. And you're thinking to yourself, Jeff, do you know how bad it's going to hurt if I give that thing away because it means so much to me? Yes, that's exactly why I'm asking you to do this, because sometimes possessions can have a power over you that they should never have. And the only way to break that power is to give it away. Nehemiah is giving away his energy, he's giving away his time, he's giving away back-breaking work and taking nothing for it. He could, but he's not taking anything for it. He's giving away his treasures today. And giving away your treasures is hard. But step 2 is even harder. You see, today, the challenge is not just to give away your treasures. It's ultimately to give away your heart. And if we're honest, it's easier to give away your most treasured possession than it is to give away your heart. But there is no way to be the Christian that God has called you to if you're not willing to open up your home and open up your heart. Listen to what the Bible says, not just to your friends, but Jesus says to your enemies. That's the kind of faith, that's the kind of heart that Jesus is calling his people to. So let's see how Nehemiah opens his heart up and gives his heart away, starting in verse 17. Here's what he describes. There were 750 Jews and officials, as well as guests from the surrounding nations at my table. Each day, listen to this feast that he puts on. Each day, 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, and some fowl were prepared for me. An abundance of all kinds of wine was provided every 10 days. Check this out. But I didn't demand the food allotted to the governor. In other words, this is my rightful place. I'm supposed to get paid this, but I didn't. I didn't demand the food allotted to the governor because the burden on the people was so heavy. I was sitting there thinking to myself, Nehemiah has 150 people coming to his house every night. This is like a life group meeting in his house, except for it's not small, it's 150 people. Then I'm trying to think to myself, what would be a modern day example of this feast that Nehemiah is describing for us? And the closest thing that I could come up to was a wedding reception. Y'all remember when we could do weddings back before Corona and when we could do wedding receptions? Wedding receptions are typically a blowout, right? So expensive that the bride and the groom can't pay for it. Mama and daddy, I'm going to need your help paying for this meal. Nehemiah is saying, hey, I had a wedding reception of 150 bigwigs and all of their guests. I don't even know how many guests this was. I had a wedding reception in my house every night. And I paid for it out of my own pocket. I didn't even ask the people to pay for it. They're supposed to pay for it. But I didn't ask for them to pay for it. This was out of my own pocket. And Nehemiah is the kind of guy that is giving because his heart is pure. I'm just going to tell you right now, there are some people, unfortunately, even Christians in the church, they're giving with an ulterior motive. They're the kind of people that say, hey, they're basically laundering their money. And you can go ahead and put that on Instagram or on Twitter. I don't care. Because they're basically saying, I'll give you my money if you'll turn right back around and spend it on me. But oh, by the way, I want IRS contribution statement for the money that I gave you. And I want you to turn right back around, church, and spend that money on me anyway. Nehemiah is saying, I gave, and I gave with an open heart, and I asked for nothing in return because my heart was heavy for these people. Almost every home in America right now is both schoolroom and office and home all at the same time. In other words, America just went through this massive shift in our houses, and our houses not just became where we live, but it also became where we work and where our children went to school. And I'm going to ask you to open your heart like Nehemiah opens his heart by opening your home like Nehemiah opens his home. At Two Cities Church, we do this in life groups. And for the past couple of months, because of social distancing, we haven't been able to meet in each other's houses. But before the shelter-in-place order, we were coming to people's houses and we were meeting each other in their presence physically. Now we're meeting each other online we're meeting each other digitally. And there is a day, we hope it's soon, where we're back to meeting each other in homes, in coffee shops, in restaurants, physically, where people are connecting deeply with one another. But even after that day happens, we're going to continue to meet digitally for those folks that don't live in our community and have found Two Cities Church, as well as the people that live here physically. If you're asking, why is this such a big deal? Why are life groups such a big deal to you guys? You guys sound like you're freaks about this. It's because this is where real honesty happens. This is where real accountability happens. If you could have seen what I saw last week in my group, this is where real vulnerability happens. And you won't find that dialing into a big church service. You won't find that when people go back to worshiping in big corporate worship services. It happens when they open homes up. And because they're opening their home up, they're opening their heart up. This is why doing life together is such a big deal. And when this service is over with, before the end of this service today, we're going to show you an easy way to get connected to our church and to one of our life groups. Nehemiah was willing to give his treasure. Nehemiah was willing to give his heart. And Nehemiah was ultimately willing to give the results away. Now, I saved verse 19 for last. I really saved the best for last. Because this one short verse describes everything that you need to know about chapter 5 from the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah, why would you be the kind of guy who could charge tax, but you didn't? Why would you be the kind of guy who could be fed off of the work and the taxes of the people, but you didn't? Why are you the kind of guy that would be willing to work hard and take no paycheck? Why would you be the kind of guy who welcomes people into your house and instead of asking them to throw a couple of bucks in for the pizza and the taco chips, you pay for everything out of your pocket? Why would you be willing to do that? Here's Nehemiah's answer to that, verse 19. Remember me favorably, my God, for all that I have done for this people. Now, when you're reading the Bible for the first time, maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you stumbled across this broadcast. Maybe you don't even necessarily believe in Jesus or what we believe as a church. When you're reading this verse for the first time, it can sound pretty arrogant to you. So let me explain it. Nehemiah is a governor. He would be the equivalent today of the President of the United States. He is the president for the land of Israel. And what we're reading in verse 19 is a sentence out of Nehemiah's private prayer journal. This would be like us getting President Trump or President Obama's personal journal and asking them, why did you make the decisions that you made? Because your decisions impact millions of people over many years. And Nehemiah just tells us the answer to why he does what he does in this one simple verse. In fact, it's in 6 words that Nehemiah answers this for us. Nehemiah is a man who is living in 2 cities at the same time. And by the way, if you're stumbling across our broadcast today, when we use the name Two Cities Church, we're not referring geographically to the city of Columbus, Georgia, and the city of Phoenix City, Alabama. We're actually referring to two totally different cities. A city of heaven that we believe we will be in one day, that we belong to, and that's our ultimate destination. But we also live in this city called earth right now. And because we live in this city called earth, God expects us to do something with the life that He's giving us right now until He calls us to be with Him in His heavenly city. We refer to this as the earthly city and the eternal city. Nehemiah sacrifices everything, gives away everything in this earthly city because, like you, like me, Nehemiah is looking for his reward in the eternal city. He's asking God's favor on what he is sacrificing here. Because Nehemiah knows sometimes you're going to give to people and they're so selfish, they're so self-centered that they'll never even notice that I gave. But God, you notice. And God, even if nobody recognizes what I've done, would you remember me? Would you recognize me for what I've done? Nehemiah gives incredibly. In fact, I want you in your house, watching this on your TV or on your tablet, to just go ahead and fill in the rest of this sentence like Nehemiah did. You, if you give, if you serve, if you open your heart, if you're willing to give your treasure, and right now I'm talking about your energy and your time and your wisdom and your abilities to something that can't pay earthly dividends, you can pray the same prayer that Nehemiah prayed. God, remember me favorably for fill in the blank. Because honestly, Two Cities Church is a church plant with great needs. Everywhere you look, there are some needs around us. And I'm not just talking about financial needs, though we have those. We have needs for energy. We have needs for wisdom. We have needs for time. We have needs for everything that you look. And you got to be just a little bit crazy to get involved in a church plant when you can go to a church that has lots of programs and is going to stumble over themselves to take care of you and to offer stuff for you. Why offer stuff to you? Why would you get involved in a church plant that doesn't have a lot to offer, is going to ask a lot of you right up front, and it's going to take a lot of hard work just to show a little bit of progress? Because in the end, we believe that our God sees our sacrifices. Our God sees what we give. And in the end, we believe that our God will reward us favorably. The reward that all Christians, all time, all over the planet are longing for is to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. So I want you to think of Two Cities like a startup corporation. I want you to think of giving and sacrificing today, even your heart or your treasure or the results, the rewards of what you're doing as like a startup today. I want you to think today like this startup that began in Atlanta, Georgia, when a businessman by the name of John Marshall began a company. At the time that he started it was called Wandering Wi-Fi. 2003. John and a couple of friends started a small corporation in Atlanta, Georgia. And he worked tirelessly, like startups, hour after hour with very little to show for it. He worked year after year making small incremental gains with very little to show for it. At some point, people that aren't fanatical about what you do, don't believe in it with every fiber of their being, will say, I'm out, I can make a lot more money for a lot less work somewhere else, which is what people did. But John stayed on course, didn't give up, and 2004, 2005, 2006 kept working. By the years 2010, 2011, he started to show some results. It was years of hard work and almost no results until 2014. In January of 2014, in fact, January 22nd of 2014, a software company from Silicon Valley in California took notice of John's little company in Atlanta, in Sandy Springs, Georgia. And they decided, this guy is onto something, and we want his business. At this point, John had been working hard enough. He had invested enough of himself that when they came knocking, they made an offer that he literally couldn't refuse. And wandering Wi-Fi became AirWatch. When it was bought out by VMware, y'all hear this number, by $1,181,000,000 on January 22nd, 2014. He started his company in mid-2003, and less than 11 years later, sells it for more than $1 billion because he kept working and kept sacrificing and kept investing. Now I want you to think about your life for just a second, like it's a startup. And you work and you sacrifice and you give with very little to show for it right now. Because what you're doing, the Bible describes as storing up treasures in heaven. And then one day you cease to live here on planet Earth. One day the results, the reward is waiting for you in heaven. And one day the dividends on your hard work and your sacrifices for King Jesus here on planet Earth pay billions like this startup AirWatch made whenever it was sold in Silicon Valley. You see, what God asks his people to do is don't store your treasure here. Store it up in heaven. And one day when you stand before God in heaven, your reward, Jesus' words, will be great. When you place your hopes and your results there and don't expect the rewards to pay you off here, I've asked you to do something really hard today. I've asked you to be willing to give up some treasure. I've asked you to be willing to give up your heart. I've asked you to be willing to give up the results and the rewards here on planet Earth for the results and the rewards like Nehemiah that will be waiting for you in heaven. And I'll just be honest with you, none of these things are easy to do, but when you've been infected by the can't get enough virus, when you have been impacted by the desire for more and continual desire for more, this is the very thing that will start to push that out of your heart. I need to hear this from time to time. You need to hear this from time to time because our hearts sometimes get the virus, can't get enough. No matter what I get, it doesn't satisfy me. And our hearts can only be cured by giving generously. So there's 3 action steps that are on the screen for you today. First, maybe you need a total heart transplant. Maybe what you need is a heart of stone to be taken out of your chest and God to place a heart of flesh inside of you. This is how the Bible describes it in the book of Ezekiel, when God makes a man or a woman born again. In just a second, I'm going to say a prayer for you. Maybe what you need is to get plugged into a life group. We're going to show you how you can do that in just a second because you're realizing you're alone, you're isolated, and even though you're in your house, we can help you connect with other believers from Two Cities Church digitally. I'm going to pray for you in just a second, but maybe you need to take the step of going through your house, finding something that's really valuable to you, and giving that thing away to somebody else. And every time you long for it, every time you miss it, it's a reminder to you of how serious you have to take the coveting, greed, the virus of can't get enough, how serious we need to take that. So let me say a quick prayer for you. And would you respond to the Holy Spirit right there in your living room, however he's speaking to you right now? Let's pray together. Father, maybe there's some Christians that are watching this that have been in church before and they become the kind of people that just want more. They're asking for themselves and don't really care about those around them. And it's starting to become to the point where they can't find satisfaction They can't find contentment. They have no peace in their life. God, maybe you're calling them to this third step on the screen to be so serious about this that this week they'd be willing to go through their house, find something precious, a treasure to them, and give that thing away to somebody who they will never see it again because they need to discipline themselves about giving away to replace the greed that is taken over in their heart. That giving will push this greed out of their heart. Father, I really believe that there are folks that are tuning in. Maybe they're in our community, maybe they're around the country, maybe they're around the world that are lonely and they want to connect with others. God, would you help me? Would you help others from our church to open our hearts up, open our computers and our tablets and our mobile devices up and invite them into our life groups digitally? And then one day, when we're able to, God, we'll open our homes up and start to invite them into our home physically. Father, every time I stand before your people, I long to see somebody who is watching this for the first time understand about their sin and realize that they can't fix their problems on their own. They're going to need supernatural help. I long to see somebody surrender to King Jesus for the first time. So would you cause somebody who's watching this broadcast right there where they're sitting to pray a simple prayer of faith, a prayer that there's no magic in these words, but if it comes from a sincere heart, will radically, totally transform them. Would you help somebody to cry out to you right now and to say, God, I'm a sinner. I can't fix my problems. It's because of me and only because of me that my life is a mess. And so right now, right here, God, this is between me and you. You know this is real. Right now, I'm turning from my sin, and I am trusting you for the first time. God, there's something seriously wrong in my heart, and I can't fix it. I need you to fix it. So God, would you move in, and would you turn me into a new person? Would you make me, in the Bible's phrase, born again right now, by giving me a new heart? And God, not only make me born again, but would you set me on the path to becoming the Christian that you want me to be? Wherever you ask me to go, God, whatever you ask me to do, I'm willing to do it. I am surrendering it all to you right now. And I pray this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.